Talk about, my God, all the things that are going on. You want to talk about some of the economics, right? Because
Let's talk about current events today.
today's class will be current events. Current events number one.
Yeah, we've done enough history. We've done enough theories. We've done enough great thinkers of all times.
Yeah. Talk about the real thing.
Let's talk about what's happening today.
All right. Welcome. Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program a friend, if I may say so, of Conversations, and that being Mark Stahlman. And he's being notified. He's the director of the Newmedia Laboratories, and he's been involved with Newmedia and has a very eclectic, wide-ranging mind that we're going to have the pleasure of interacting with here. And Mark, welcome very much to Conversation.
Thanks, Harold.
My pleasure. So why don't we've been in touch with one another, and you're really an interesting fellow, but maybe you could share with the audience a little bit of your own background, and then we could get into talking about current affairs, as you say.
Right. Well, we met in the last few years, and this has really been this period of new media tumult in New York, Silicon Alley, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And that's probably the context in which you know me.
Yeah.
But you might not recall that I had a career before that. And
You
in
were
fact,
investment banking, no?
that's the part of this that really we're going to try to focus on today.
Okay, good.
Which is to say, yes, I worked for a little over 10 years on Wall Street. I was initially what they call a sell-side analyst. That's actually a topic that's very much in the news.
A what side analyst?
Well, the way that Wall Street divides up its business is there are brokerage firms called the sell side, and then there are the pension funds called the buy side.
I see. Okay.
And so if you read in the papers nearly every day now that there is a controversy about the analysts. And those are the sell-side analysts who in my day were primarily tied to the day-to-day trading of stocks.
I see. Right.
But over the course of the past decade, they have become primarily tied to investment banking fees.
I see.
And this is the controversy that is now in the process of working its way through the python.
Yes.
We will not recognize the structure of Wall Street in probably 2 years' time.
2 years' time out from now, you're
Right.
talking. Yeah, all right.
But we will have announced, perhaps in as short a period as 1 week from taping, the actual terms under which Wall Street will be settling with the federal government, the SEC, the various states who have divided up the various investment banking firms. And so we had, for instance, a notification recently that Massachusetts is focusing on Credit Suisse First Boston, while New York is dealing with Solomon, and so forth. So there's an explosive situation here. That's to say, the same people who went after big tobacco and then went after Microsoft are now going after Wall Street.
Really? Oh?
Yes.
Okay. And you say and the dimensions of this are going to be able to be seen within a week from now. This is the 8th of October of 2002?
Yes.
It's really at a
Harvey
time...
Pitts of the SEC
right.
and representatives of the major state attorneys general got together at dinner last week, it was reported in the Times, and began their discussions, which will be announced shortly. So we're going to have the terms of settlement of a vast array of, at the very least, unethical, but potentially bordering into the criminal activities over the course of the bubble on Wall Street in the last few years. This is all going to wind up very much under the microscope.
All right. Are the terms of the restructuring, is there going to be restructuring in terms of the way the market functions, or the terms by which things are done in any kind of a major systems way?
Yes.
And will we be getting a view, or at least a preview, of what that structure is likely to be, and in ways that it might differ from what we have been dealing with in the out of the past?
In particular, the category known as research. Now, this is the part of the world that I spent 10 years in. That category is going to be blown off the map because we're dealing with people who often are pulling down multiple millions of dollars per year. The question immediately becomes, well, who pays for this? And what's going to happen is that these various regulatory and legal authorities are going to demand that they not be paid by investment banking.
Okay. Because of the inflating the stock?
Right. Because
price,
they have collected thousands of emails when they went in and collected the evidence about this. They collected thousands of emails about how the analyst would publicly say one thing, positive, and then
to boost the stock price,
and then privately say what they really thought, which was invariably negative. So
now, why did they do? Let's just get it straight. Why would they be doing that?
Because they were being paid millions of dollars to do that. To say something positive about the stock meant that their firm would attract the investment banking business. An investment banking sale of stock, an initial public offering or a secondary offering, could bring tens of millions of dollars into the coffers of the investment bank.
Right.
And that would then wind up being apportioned amongst the various players, but amongst those, the research analyst would get a very fat piece.
So he was in on the action then. And
that will now come to a screeching halt.
You will. You think that's going to happen? That's going to really change it? It has to happen.
It has to happen. I mean, look at the history of this. These people are not fooling around.
By these people, you mean
the people who got big tobacco are not fooling around.
$28 billion to some lady out in Kansas or something.
The people who it was California, I think. But
was it California?
But the people who then went after Microsoft, and Microsoft knuckled under as well. This isn't some joke. This isn't some sideshow. This is very real, and everybody who's involved with this recognizes the seriousness of it. So we're winding up now having people being interviewed at the heads of these firms saying, you know, I guess we're going to have to do something drastic.
Well, I didn't realize all that was going on. I know there was a lot of things were coming out of the situation here, and one was that the analysts will tout the stock and so forth in order to put because everybody was getting rich on the options, and the price would go up and the values would go up, and everybody was getting very rich on that. And the analysts, you would hardly find an analyst who would badmouth or talk truth to any particular stock because it was. Well, it just wasn't in the zeitgeist or something.
Now, the part we began with, which was a little bit of my own background, is that I left Wall Street when that aspect was beginning to take over.
I was going to ask you whether that's coming out of a long historical pattern or what changed it, what changed the situation. And,
What changed was the phenomenon of the 90s. You remember what was described as the new economy. You remember the great credit that, for instance, the Democrats and Clinton and ultimately Gore tried to take for this phenomenon.
Invented it myself.
Right. This was a classic investment bubble.
Like a tulip.
Like the tulip mania that is the example most people cite. But in fact, this one was driven by new technology, and it's not the first time this has happened. We've been through this kind of boom-bust cycle before in technology. It's not something that we're unfamiliar with, but in this particular case, it became so extreme that it began to sneak into virtually every other aspect of the economy. So we have now gone through a kind of an economic collapse that could be extremely long-lasting and very, very serious.
Worldwide. It would be a worldwide thing.
Absolutely.
And do we look to Japan? I mean, do we look to they've been in the doldrums since 1990 or something like that. And I mean, is there a link in that in some sort of a way that would link back to what we're doing, or how do you see things? Because everything's globalized now. The market's globalized, and the rules of the game. Are we going to rewrite the rules of the game in terms of the investment community?
Yes.
Okay.
And the link to Japan is a very important one, but it's not necessarily the one that people are most familiar with. It has become very fashionable in business publications, from the op-ed page of the New York Times through Fortune magazine and the other business publications. It's become very fashionable to ask the question, are we all becoming Japanese? Is this, and that may be a fine title for this conversation we're having now.
That popular song,
This is sort of the theme that is being widely discussed now.
And what do they mean by it? What is meant by that?
They look back to the collapse of a bubble in Japan which most people think of as a real estate bubble.
Oh. They used to have absurd real estate values in Japan. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, really crazy.
And most people go on to describe it as a situation that has not been fixed because of the peculiarities of the way that bank loans dominate the Japanese economy. So I think both of those treatments, considering it to be a real estate collapse to begin with, is wrong.
You do? Okay.
Considering it to be fundamentally driven by bank loan policies is wrong. And the part that is most often
in terms of trying to understand what's going on
in terms of understand what happened.
Yeah, right, or is happening.
And why it continues.
Yeah, and they just announced now, didn't the guy just give some new portfolio to somebody to make radical changes, get ready for big changes in Japan?
That's right. Again, today's newspaper has the story that the new guy coming in has informed the banks that they're going to have to put up with a lot of pain here. That's not going to fix the situation. It's not going to be resolved because it's not recognizing how we got in this mess to begin with.
The Japanese now you're talking
Correct.
about. Yeah, okay. Now, why have we taken that as conventional wisdom? What was wrong with that, and how did the Japanese get into that long-term since about 1990?
I will answer the question by bringing us back to our own situation.
Okay, good.
We'll go through a little bit of the development of the late 1990s, which will be far more familiar to the viewers of the show than the situation in Japan. And then we'll come back to Japan and show the very close parallel to what we went through.
Okay, I hope you're taking notes.
The Internet,
yes,
as my 19-year-old daughter informed me the other day, is so 1990s, Dad.
Did she tell you
Yes,
that?
right.
That's great. I love
it. The very widespread reaction against new technologies, including new technologies under the name Newmedia, which I helped to coin and popularize.
And Silicon Alley, I think.
That's also true. We have a situation where the New York Times, for instance, appears to have a virtually blanket editorial policy to only print negative stories. And from a few reporters and others I know who are involved with this is in fact the kind of instructions that they are getting. So we've got a situation now which, if anything, is completely upside down what it looked like a few years ago. We came into the years 99 and 2000 with an expectation of endless growth. Now, that expectation was based upon some very real technology that was spreading at an extremely rapid rate. What it didn't take into account is that at some point everybody would have one or two or three of what was being sold.
Well,
it's a classic situation of market saturation.
All right. Well, okay.
If I invent a new kind of fruit, at a certain point, everybody's going to have apples.
Yeah, right.
And you're going to have to come up with something brand new. Now, the problem that we got ourselves into is that we bet so much on the Internet and on future versions of the Internet that we have avoided what I think should be obvious, which is that we need to, in fact, look in other places. We need to go in other directions. And in fact, we need to consider something which may be very difficult for many people to consider, which is that today's computers do not serve us very well. We might, in fact, need to take a look at all the complexity that these computers have brought into our lives, the complexity of this studio, the complexity of the equipment that we are now recording on, the complexity of the equipment that people are going to have to use to watch these shows. If people are out there watching this show on streaming video, that's not a very simple process.
There's a lot involved,
There's a lot involved.
It's been hard won over the long haul of technological development, too.
We might need to consider the possibility that we've been painting ourselves into a corner of complexity, and that we need to consider technologies to get ourselves out of that in a dramatic fashion. So here's the scenario I'm laying out for you.
Yeah, that's interesting,
We have, in effect, bet everything on one collection of technologies, the Internet. We are now in a situation where most people, if you ask them, in the production of technology, in the investment in technology, in the buying of technology, will tell you that they are still planning to put money into the Internet, that the Internet is still what they are looking for to pull them out of this mess, and that is not the case.
Oh, okay.
We are still focused on something which, in fact, has run its course.
The Internet,
The Internet has run its course. It is finished as
Yeah.
a growth opportunity.
Huh, that's really something from somebody who's been on the edge of that. So where is the growth opportunity that we can find if we look about?
In computers and in networking, it is to be found in the laboratories. The computer science laboratories in the U.S. and around the world have been working on this problem of complexity for the past 20 years, and very little of those inventions have found their way into products.
The invention, not to mention the instruction booklets that one poor citizen tries to get through and can't get through page.
Exactly. Those phone books full of instructions are absolutely insane. No need for that kind of complexity.
Okay.
In fact, IBM has gone so far as to describe this as the crisis of complexity.
Really? They use that term, yeah?
That's their term.
Yeah.
And this crisis, they correctly point out, if we...
The engineer's fault.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right.
In effect, it's IBM's fault.
We're not Japanese. We're engineers. They're all engineers. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
And that complexity crisis we've been forced into, IBM begins to draw us towards the conclusion that if we don't solve this, if we continue to layer more and more complex systems on top of what we already have, we will run out of people to fix them, to install them, to update them, to just simply keep them running. We will absorb more and more and more financial and general economic resources in maintaining a system that continually breaks, that is inherently insecure, that humans can't figure out how this stuff actually works. We will be in a downward spiral caused by our own inventions.
Okay, well, now why is it that in the working of the marketplace or something like that, or in the idea of industrial or just good design science, why have not the geniuses who have been working on these things come up and put through good design templates that make things at the user end, if that's the term that's adequate, at the user end, are in fact simple, but still do encompass and incorporate the choice and the possibilities of, that the complexity would make available to them. Why have they not done that either in the name of the market advantage that they would get if they came up with something like that, or in the ability of them to see patterns and to just have essentially a good design template for our technology?
This is exactly the kind of explosive situation that presents some enormously important opportunities. We have a situation here now where, as you correctly said before, the engineers are to blame for the situation we've been put in.
God bless them. I mean, because they're the ones who brought a lot of it to us, and they just have a way of thinking, and they're sweet. There's a sweet quality to them and everything, but...
Let me describe the way that a very interesting gentleman who has dealt with this through much of his career described this recently. The mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, was introduced at a recent conference in New York by the Software Industry Association as the great example of a man who built a fortune based upon these technologies, and therefore he comes from us.
Yeah, Bloomberg Wire.
Bloomberg
is on every. It's indispensable.
Is a hardware software combination. This is the quintessential computer company success.
It's a happy ship. You ever been there where they do it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really a happy ship. Everybody's happy, I mean, they're turning it up.
Michael Bloomberg got past the point of describing New York City and his role in New York City and congratulating the software industry for having this conference here. He then turned on the audience and he said, I do know something about what you folks do. And if you'll pardon me, I'm not sure that you're part of the solution.
Really?
He said, let me tell you a little story here.
You were here at this? You were here?
I was at the conference. I was sitting 10 feet away from Bloomberg. I had sat...
And is this where you got these ideas that you're
No,
giving us now, or are you already meditating on the idea?
I was already setting up. I had no idea what he was going to say.
Yeah, but he said what really resonated to what you've been thinking.
I had already set up my table.
Great minds.
And a couple of tables adjacent. We were already talking about the crisis of complexity.
Yeah, right.
We're already talking about how we need to scrap much of the existing technology.
Isn't that great? And then the man
Then the man gets up.
Isn't that great,
and
boy?
He says, let me tell you
complexity,
how this works.
Yeah.
A little story for you, he says. It came to my attention a few years ago that the simple process of getting a badge to get into my building was so complicated that lines would form out the door into the street to get badges.
Right.
And when I realized this, I took the programmer responsible for the badging system and made him...
The badger or the badgee?
Made him sit there all day long and deal with the wrath of the people who had to put up with this complexity. And then I had him completely rewrite the system. Now there are no lines. None of that goes on anymore. And he said, there are too many people in the room here whose careers depend upon
complexity.
Things that are so complicated, only they can get them to work.
Absolutely. How do you get... That's a scarce resource. I only know how to turn the screw to the right, to the left, or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the first part of the answer to your question, is that until IBM, Microsoft, and all the rest are dragged kicking and screaming
into the 21st century
to the need for radically simple systems, which will require a certain amount of admission on their part that they are the ones who are the culprits. They won't do it.
Okay.
But that's only a part of this explosive situation. The next part of the situation is the financial market or capital allocation.
Let's come back
process.
to that a minute. This thing about the complexity. I mean, the complexity, so the engineer is going to be saying, or somebody is going to be saying, as you presented that they are going to be brought, so that it's simple, but at the same time, I don't know how to get at this, but it's simple at the same. But there's a thing. Norbert Wiener seems to me one time was talking. In fact, I think your dad had been associated with him, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure.
Yes, my father actually was
he may have been in the room. I think I got it from you, but you might have. I gotten some good things from you. But that you got this idea in cybernetics. The idea that you have information overload or systems analysis. You get information overload. We get information overload permits pattern recognition at a higher level from that, and that you can see relationships between subsystems of a system, and that you could get, so you can have a lot of complexity that's built in at that level that would be overloaded if the person's in that low, but that you can make it at the user end or something more complex. I think it seems to me in the design of the universe,
have to, in fact,
maybe in the design of the universe and in the design of the science of going on the design of the universe, we could find something that's relevant to this user-friendly or whatever it is, the simplicity in the design.
It's very straightforward.
Just through straightforward, anticipatory design science.
Yes, absolutely.
Or a good design.
Now,
and that we can, if I may, we may be able to have our cake with the complexity and all the 10 million hues of blue and so forth, but also the ability to access it both, so that it's a great promise that perhaps we can have. Do you understand what I'm saying at that level?
Fortunately, because this has enormous economic consequences.
Yes, right. We can get to that.
In fact, as I stated earlier, and I'll now emphasize, we've given a little bit more of the background for this, this is the problem that computer scientists have been working on for the last 20 years.
Yeah, particularly because they keep coming, nanotechnology, they keep going, the Moore's law keeps galloping exponentially and so forth.
We are still installing computer systems based on 1960s designs.
Really? Is that a fact?
Yes.
I have no way of knowing.
70s, 80s, 90s, all kinds of breakthroughs in the laboratory have yet to make their way into new products.
Well, okay.
We have enormous breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. We know how to build computers that won't break. We know how to build much more rich interfaces so that people can use them and not have to read the manuals and figure out which buttons to push. We now know how to build databases that contain information that we can actually use, as opposed to things that are essentially robotic. Now here's the link back to Norbert Wiener, and then I'll indicate how MIT, which was the institution that he spent most of his life at, is addressing this problem today.
Good.
Wiener believed, and published as early as 1950 in a book called The Human Use of Human Beings.
Yes, he did, yeah.
That we were heading towards a terrible clash between humanity and these computers that mostly hadn't even been invented yet. In 1950, there was very little on the scene. But he correctly anticipated.
It was in the realm of science fiction in a lot of people's minds.
He knew that we would build machines that would challenge auto workers, secretaries, and replace them one by one by one. We're sitting here right now with the west coast of the United States shut down. Because the longshoremen are fighting the problem that Norbert Wiener said in 1950 is inevitable.
They got that thing. I tell you to God, I told you on the phone, I think they got that thing. They can drive a container through and they do all the inventory of everything that's in there, not to mention bombs.
That's right.
As a security threat.
Absolutely right.
And it's technologically there, but you got to have somebody who's worried about the job. Now, that's going on throughout the whole economy. People are worrying about how they're... You know what they're worrying about, people, the general citizens? They're worrying about how are they going to get money to meet their needs and to buy, so that they have a role to play in terms of the way the economy is functioned that is based upon their contribution to the productive process through what I would say is a labor theory of value, but I don't want to go astray. But that's a big problem.
We have allowed ourselves to depend on this technology, which is ultimately robots. We've allowed robots to so extensively take over aspects of our lives that we have become, in relationship to these technologies,
a PC plug-in.
Robot operators.
Yeah, right.
We have become the people that tend to them. This is the crisis of complexity. There's only one way to break that cycle.
Okay.
And Norbert Wiener pointed towards this as early as 1950.
Pattern recognition?
We have to emphasize the higher qualities of the humans and build systems that support those higher qualities. Now, there's actually a name that has been used for 10 to 15 years in computer science to describe this quality and capability in design. Human-centered computing.
Okay.
And if you want to read, or if your viewers want to read, probably the best single place where these ideas have been collected to date, the title of the book is The Unfinished Revolution, and the author's name is Michael Dertouzos, D-E-R-T-O-U-Z-O-S.
He's at MIT.
He died last year.
He did die. I didn't realize.
He spent nearly 20 years running the computer science department at MIT.
Yeah. He died. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So, in a sense, he was Norbert Wiener's successor.
Was he really? I didn't realize that.
Well, the computer science department is what Wiener invented cybernetics.
Well, Negroponte's up there?
Negroponte is in the Media Lab.
Okay, Media Lab, right. Yeah, right, okay.
So to the extent that Norbert Wiener is a mathematician and a scientist and the man who invented cybernetics, Negroponte was a architect in training, not in the same line of background at all.
The Media Lab is a laboratory?
The Media Lab is a collection of people who have been very successful in getting funding from a wide range of corporations.
For new applications.
In order to basically not get much out the door.
What do you think? Well, okay.
Well, that's the general view.
Hans Moravec is another, with the robotics, I guess, down at Philip. Well, no, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Out in Pittsburgh, right.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, yeah.
The answer is evident. Anybody who gets halfway interested can explore this in any number of places. The Tech Review, which is a publication of MIT, which is on newsstands across the country, is a good place.
You see, they had it on the internet the other day that MIT is going to make all of their curriculum available to everybody free on the internet. Yeah, I just had it. I'll email it to you. Yeah.
So we know the problem in the larger sense here is that we have painted ourselves into a corner with technology.
With complexity.
With complexity. With
And
robotic complexity.
And the system hasn't filtered that out through the marketplace. Why hasn't the marketplace filtered out that baloney just because people would say, I would rather buy this thing that works rather than that thing that is complicated?
It will with a vengeance.
Mm-hmm. You think it will? Okay.
I'm quite certain that it will.
Okay, well, okay.
And in a certain sense, that's the punchline of the question we posed earlier. Are we all becoming Japanese? The answer is no.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why the answer to that is no is none of the reasons given in the New York Times or Fortune magazine. It's not because we don't give bank loans for inflated real estate prices.
Right.
That's not the reason why it's not going to happen.
Do you think we'll get a real estate bubble burst in the United States economy?
No.
You do not, thank God. Okay.
And I also don't think that we're going to have a collapse of consumer confidence, and I also don't think we're going to move into a deflationary spiral. But
thank you.
But the reason why
I sure as hell hope you're right.
The reason why these things are not going to happen is because we are not going to make the same mistake the Japanese did. Now, let me try to explain.
Please do. These are words that are...
Given all of this background, why our situation is different.
Ours being the United States.
Ours being the United States, even though it appears to be similar in many regards. Why do you think the Japanese economy collapsed 10, 12 years ago?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I got all kinds of things I filtered through my my thing.
Well, let me offer
commitment to full employment, commitment to all kinds of things.
Let me offer an explanation.
There was a bubble burst
from the standpoint of
somebody.
And I
thought it was real estate.
No, those are all
things that have.
Those are all things that happened on the way down.
That's the problem when you're in pattern recognition mode of all these different things that people have great expertise, and you have a hard time being able to get into all the details of it. You got to have a thing where you can get both.
The problem in many regards with pattern recognition is that people come with their own pattern recognizers built in.
The template is built in, right? Yeah.
So if you are trained in looking for real estate booms, you'll see a real estate boom and bust.
Well, it's been like that, isn't it? Every time.
Let me answer the question.
All right.
And then we can backfill.
All right. Fine.
Because I was there.
Reverse engineer.
I was deeply involved in the situation. I knew many of the key players.
Yeah, I know.
And I know.
You brought AOL online.
I brought AOL public as an investment banker. But I'm saying in the Japanese scene, I made it a part of my life on Wall Street. It's a part of my contract that I got to spend as much as a month a year in Japan.
Did you really? Yeah.
Yes. Because it was my belief that I couldn't possibly understand the global interconnections of this business without understanding what was happening in Japan. And I actually wrote about a year before the world began to recognize something, a number of reports about how Japan was going to fall apart. It was very clear to me this was going to collapse, and I'll tell you what I said then and what I believe today is the reason why. They bet on continuing the same cycles of technology that had put them into their position of economic wealth. In particular, they bet the farm on high-definition television. We have easily forgotten.
I know they did, but they were into the. Go ahead. Yeah.
We've easily forgotten how important this mistake was.
I hadn't realized it ever. I didn't realize it's a pattern I missed.
Well,
I seem to have missed part of the pattern.
The Japanese economy is based, as most would consider, on consumer electronics.
To a large degree, yeah.
Consumer electronics is based on...
the second largest economy in the world.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Consumer electronics is based upon the rise of television as a dominant mass medium in the post-World War II era.
That's true. There have been other things, but that's true, yeah.
To the extent that companies like Sony and Panasonic and others are at the pinnacle of the second largest economy in the world, these are TV companies.
But they're researching advanced toilet
today.
Now, today was in the Times.
They have found themselves... They have fallen or risen.
The final extension of mankind's technological consciousness.
As we were saying, if Marshall McLuhan had a chance to write another chapter.
As an extension.
There would be a chapter on the new Japanese toilet. It says the final extension of man.
Those ones that have spray and things that surprise people.
Oh, they'll play.
More people have those kind of toilets in Japan than they do have PCs, it said in the article. One little piece. Yeah, but anyway, go ahead, Anyway.
Well, the bet on high-definition television, which is to say the the Japan economy-wide commitment to a planned obsolescence of every television set in the world.
Well,
which they believed they were going to be the manufacturer of billions of television sets.
Yeah. Well, we went from black and white to color, and now we're going through the digital. So the digital is coming. So that's a big thing. You're going to obsolete.
No, it's
Isn't
not.
it been a problem?
We're not going to. We're not.
No,
we're not going to throw away.
Isn't it a problem generally?
The 5 television sets that have been installed in every American household.
Well, okay, but isn't it been a problem, Mark, that
in spite of the efforts by the federal government to force television set manufacturers to build digital television sets.
Yeah, I know. They're going to
force broadcasters.
They're going to force, yes.
To broadcast
Get thee
digital.
to the whiz.
Right. It isn't going to work.
Hey, but isn't it
this is the mistake the Japanese made.
All right. Well,
they committed at the top level, at the Ministry of Industry and Trade, the MITI, made the commitment on behalf of all of the major players that this was the future for the Japanese economy, replacing the television sets of the world.
That's right. It was a big roll of the dice. But the thing is...
And
go on.
It failed, and no one was ready to admit it, and they haven't placed a bet on anything else that would replace that, and that is the reason why the Japanese economy has been in a slump for the past 12 years.
It's been that keystone of the issue, right? I hadn't realized that. I wouldn't have thought it would have one thing. But, in general, though, let me just, for a second, in general, that's been a common problem, is that you have a technology that comes to being, and we're in cable, you have a technology, and people get an investment in that, and the investment has to be amortized. And so you've got a long-term commitment to being able to amortize and get all that out of that investment you had in order to introduce something new. And so that's a general problem that confronts. I mean, we had over-the-air broadcasting, you have cables. You had to amortize the cable. And then if you go, now they got Wi-Fi, and you got things. There's a thing coming where they're going to be able, the new technology is going to, in a certain sense, obsolesce the technology that it was built upon. And so how are we going to liaison with the historical order in a way that allows the new to come, that doesn't get us all
strangled? The difference between the Japanese
situation...
That's
a broad systems problem as far as...
The difference between the Japanese situation and our situation.
Well, I'm thinking of it as mankind's technological evolution is what I'm thinking, in a systems way.
Okay.
That's a systems problem that confronts all economies and all of mankind.
That is correct. And in the specific example of the Japanese instance of this, their bet on what would replace what came before was wrong.
Well, what about the digital change? Now, the FCC is now saying we have to digitize, and the digital thing is relentlessly coming, and it's changing a great deal of number of things. We're just going through it here in public access, where everything's being changed digital, and a lot of the equipment we had is being obsolesced and so forth. I'm not sure if that's the same. It's the same thing you're talking about in terms of complexity in that. Where
is the pressure for shifting this system of television to digital coming from?
Well, I think it's a convergence of the computer and the communication.
That's not an economic pressure. That's an idea. Where in this economy, what's the driving need and requirement? Is the consumer demanding this? No.
Usually they have to be brought to it.
Is the broadcaster demanding this?
Now, what are we talking about? I'm getting confused. What are we talking about? Digital?
A shift from an analog to a digital television distribution and reception network.
Well, it might be coming from, the nanotechnology and the advancing of Moore's law and the computer and all that sort of thing, and bringing a combination of these kind of things.
But those are economic forces only when they are brought into play with
coming from the internet and
the needs in the market.
Yeah, the needs are the wants. Yeah, the needs are the
There are no needs and wants for digital television.
There are no needs.
Doesn't exist?
Must exist some. They sell some. Not digital television. You mean, wait a minute, let me bear it. Because we're going through that here now, an example. So we're now changing everything over from analog, SVHS tape or something, Betacam or something.
Right.
We're changing over to what do they call it, DVD or no
DV-cam.
DV-cam and mini DV, and we're all going digital, and everything's being done on computers.
That's
the Avid is being run. We're doing all the editing with non-linear editing advantages and all these kind of things.
Absolutely right.
So we're getting very good. And on Final Cut Pro and that kind of stuff. So that's advantages that are coming, and the price is coming down.
The people who are sitting out there watching this program today are watching it over an analog television set,
Yeah.
distributed over...
Unless they're watching it on their computer because it's being streamed.
Which I will guarantee you is extremely small in terms of the audience for MNN programs.
Well, it might be growing. I mean, with the broadband things growing now, and you got the Wi-Fi movement. Don't you see? Hoboken's hot now.
Yeah, right.
Hoboken's a hot zone. You can just get it full screen on your tablet. Mr. Gates says that's the future of the Internet, and it is a vast and wondrous future that spreads out before us, young man.
Thank you very much. You have just made my point.
Yeah, okay.
To the extent that we bet on such foolish things as the future of the Internet, which is already over.
I don't. Oh, go ahead.
To the extent that we.
How can the Internet
To the
be
extent
over?
that we commit the same mistake the Japanese did, a high definition Internet. To the extent that we say faster and everything's going even more digital, and we're going to wireless everything, and we're going to have Internet addresses for our sneakers.
Tablets.
To the extent that we make those commitments, we will wind up in a prolonged 10, 20-year economic decline, stagnation, deflationary spiral. All those bad things that I told you before are not going to happen are implied by each of those public pronouncements.
Well, okay, I don't quite see. What is going to happen?
We're going to face up to the crisis of complexity. We're not going to layer even more complex wireless everywhere systems on top of...
Wi-Fi doesn't have a good future then?
No.
You don't think? Okay.
No. There's no need for it.
Broadband. There's no need for broadband extension? No need. Okay. And you say the Internet...
Beyond its current reach.
And the Internet is irrelevant, you said? The World Wide Web
is finished as a growth opportunity.
As a growth
We need to turn our attention
to
realizing that we have built such an incredibly complicated set of systems. We're going to have to begin to replace them.
With
radically simple systems.
Like
based
pigeons.
Like pigeons, right. Yeah, exactly. Homing pigeons.
Homer. No.
We're going to have to take that computer science that has been
in
developed over the course of the last 20 years.
Okay.
We're going to have to build systems that don't break. We're going to have to build systems that can repair themselves. We're going to have to build systems that don't require us to learn how to press all the buttons. We're going to have to learn how to build systems with very different user interfaces. All these things are in the laboratories. If you were to go to MIT or Stanford or Carnegie Mellon or Georgia Tech, you'll see all this stuff in the labs.
Okay.
And I'm not saying we're going to buy these things because they are gee whiz. I'm saying we're going to buy these things because we have to. Because the crisis of complexity is dire in its economic and even broader than that in its national security implications.
And now, are these things going to affect? Are these kind of things going to affect the software patterns by which large systems are operating and that sort of thing? And it's going to make things. It's a design science revolution?
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
That's what it is.
It's already in place.
Anticipatory design science.
It's already in place.
Okay, so
it just is not expressed in the products.
Okay, it is not expressed in the products, but it exists as in a certain sense like an altered ontologic reality or something like that, but has not yet been able to manifest itself? Right. It is, okay.
And what is necessary?
What's holding it up?
What's necessary?
We've only got a few minutes left, but what's holding it up?
What's holding it up is a combination of
mired in history?
Of resistance on the part of many of the suppliers of existing systems. The fact that IBM has come out with what they even refer to as a manifesto, and focus their...
They have a manifesto?
They have a manifesto on,
on
the
site?
crisis of complexity.
Really? On their site?
Yes.
I can find it? Great.
You can find
IBM.com, I can find it?
You go to the research site. They call it autonomic computing.
Autonomic.
Autonomic. And the reason for this is straightforward. This is IBM's own language, but it's a simple concept.
Yeah. Automation.
We have been building the central nervous system without recognizing that what allows us to do what we do, breathe, our hearts beating, our ability to stand up and walk around, is not a central nervous system phenomenon. We have an autonomic nervous system that keeps us operating. If we had to think about every little thing that happens in our bodies in a central nervous system fashion, if we had to provide complex computers to do this,
I know.
we'd crash.
I absolutely crash. No, so I was talking, I know I was talking in the phone, but
we wouldn't get up in the morning.
Nicholas Wade told me the other day and confused. I just did, you know how many cells there are in a human organism?
Billions.
No, no, billion. Do you know how many? I happen to know. Nicholas Wade tells it to us in the New York Times and everything like that. And not a life cycle, but at one time. 100 trillion cells in a human organism, and there's epidermal cells, there's liver cells and everything, and they're all semi-permeable, there's semi-permeable gas exchange and everything like that, and they're all overlaid with the design that is like in a system. It works as a system, and every cell is important to that. And is that a metaphor that can be able to apply to technology, you think? An important one. And every cell is important.
With the specific extension that we are now going to have to build is to build an autonomic nervous system so that we do not require constant central nervous system intervention. That's the IBM take on it. You can find a 30-page manifesto on this whole topic, raising the whole issue of the crisis of complexity.
We usually don't have to consciously will our hair to grow, do we? It usually does, except in my case, you know, it got cross-wired.
The first answer to your question as to what's holding this back is the answer that Michael Bloomberg gave. Many of you in the room might actually be part of the problem and not a part of the solution.
Yeah, not realizing it.
So those who are in the technology business are going to have to come to a rude awakening. But in addition to that, and now we'll come back to the part we were starting with.
Okay, just to keep you informed, we got 11 minutes.
Good. The financial system has contributed to all of these problems. We have just gone through an enormous bubble burst in technology valuations.
Oh, absolutely.
The problem in the stock market was not General Motors. The problem in the stock market was not drug companies. The problem in the stock market was technology companies drawing everything else along with it. And the fact of the matter is that most investors, professional or amateur, are not speculators.
Yeah, they're not venture.
No.
Most of that stuff is pretty steady return. And most of those investments are pretty sure, you know.
Most
it's coming out of future earnings.
People will only invest in things they consider to be sure bets.
Sow bellies or...
Right.
Yeah. Or...
So how do you get into a situation where everybody is betting on the number 31?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Black.
Right. Well, black would be even a relatively sure bet.
That's
no, people are betting on 00.
Yeah, right, that's right. Yeah, right. They were doing that. It was just a tulip frenzy.
And the reason why that happened was because we had this collusion between the technologists not quite telling us the truth and Wall Street feeding into that and not quite telling us the truth.
And they're going to get that straightened out.
And all of that is now come crashing down, and it will continue, and it will actually work its way through the python. We're going to wind up with a dramatically different situation.
And how's it going to be then? I wonder, I mean, one of the things, if we're going to have an autonomous...
Cleaning house.
If we're going to have a cleaning house, and it might be appropriate. I mean, we may be waking from a nightmare or something. We may be coming to a realization that there are tremendous possibilities that are inherent. What a great thing to be able to take all those containers and have it get really efficient and really be able to move things in a good way. And all these advantages, that sort of thing. It might be there that we're realizing that. But there's some people in terms of the traditional pattern. I said before, amortizing or whatever, the traditional pattern. And one of the things is the system by which the people are related to what it is that's being produced in an economic sense. And one of them is an automatic or an autonomic, what did you call it? Automatic?
Autonomic.
Autonomic system of being able to have systems that work. There's a Sara Lee factory, I think they don't have any people in there. It's just all computer things. They turn out these great cakes and things like that. And the thing is that you can
have... there's lots of people running around fixing those computers.
Lord Keynes, when he wrote that piece to his grandchildren in 1930, that's about now, he said, you are going to be confronted with a thing. This is Lord Keynes. He said, you're going to be confronted with vast technological unemployment. That there are going to be systems that are going to be able to be incredibly productive, well-designed, ecologically appropriate, perfectly thing done, and they're not going to need the workers to do the things of turning the screw in just the right way, and that's the way, the only way that most of the people have any way of gaining income in order to buy all those gadgets or whatever can be done or to operate the economy is to have what they call a job. And all of our national economies are predicated upon a labor theory of value, and income is distributed to the masses of people through what we call jobs. So you got a problem of an outmoded way of thinking in terms that's going to allow either for the growth or the equity that we need. And if we don't get growth and equity in some way relating the masses, who are going to have to buy the stuff, are going to have to be operating these things in a way, you got a tremendous productive capability. I think you could be facing, unless we get at some economic assumption about basic economic theory that informs our political process and our large systems, design, science, capability, and so forth. If we don't get at something like that beyond what is offered now,
we don't fully
then we're going to be facing, let me just finish the sentence, we're going to very likely to be facing, in fact, a worldwide spin out of control, deflationary depression that would make 1929 look like a cakewalk.
If we take the humans out of the picture,
in the production,
we're enormously in danger.
We're already doing it. They are out of the picture in terms of their input to production.
That, indeed, as you have indicated, produces a potentially highly unstable situation.
Yeah.
The solution to that problem is to put the humans back in the picture.
All right, go ahead.
If, in fact, we do what Wiener suggested as a solution as early as 1950, which is to emphasize the higher qualities, the capacity for making judgments, the capacity for analyzing and understanding on the part of humans, we begin to solve that problem. If we replace the existing overly complicated systems with systems that are based upon the principles of human-centered computing, as described by the computer scientists, we begin to reintroduce the humans into the economic arena.
We're going to introduce the humans as competitors to the nanochip. They're going to be able to compete and do faster and try. It sounds to me like you're going to try and make the humans push all those hairs up through the skull of the body and economic politic. No, I mean. But the humans are perhaps, it may be that the whole economic man syndrome, that's what I'm trying to say. Economic man as somebody who's here in order to do and function in this marketplace thing, which is a fundamentalist value now that's on the lips of so many people in this world, is that your reason you're here is to do something where you are going to be fitting into a Skinnerian view where you are rewarded or punished in order to what you do by a thing called the market, an economic man. Maybe
but that
economic
takes the human
man,
out of the picture.
Yeah, but no.
To the extent that you wind up with the human as a cog in the machine.
No, it doesn't necessarily.
There is no human in the picture.
I'm sorry, it doesn't necessarily take man out of the picture. It might take economic man out of the picture, and the fact that we've been busting all these kind of things that we've been concerned with, that the machines are going to be able to do better, is like those guys on the dock. There's no reason that somebody has to go and take a bag of coffee off if the machines can do it. And so what it will do, if you have some way of getting some way of income coming to the people that are no longer needed in order to do some sort of a labor, intellectual or physical to that, with autonomic systems and so forth, it will free them to be concerned with the things that really matter, like love, and the kind of things that really matter, rather than following the rat race of the man economic pattern that we've been doing, and that some people see that as a problem.
If you equate the economic man to the rat in the race, that's hardly a man.
No, but that is the way the world is set up. From all the world, most of the people, the only reason they have
what I've offered as a potential way to analyze the situation, which may be a pattern recognizer, a little bit different than the one which has been employed before, is that we've allowed robotic systems, complex robotic systems, to define our patterns for us.
I don't think we've idolized robots. We let the humans compete with what robots could do better. That's what that thing on the
That equates the human to the robot.
Yeah.
To the extent that we are putting the human and the robot in a competitive situation and calling that economic man, we have made the fundamental mistake, which we are now going to be compelled, for reasons of economic growth, economic and national security,
to take the man out of the picture.
To put the man, the real man, the man with a brain, the man with passions, the man with sensibility back in the picture.
Well, I would say it might well be, but it might well be. Just one thing to keep open in a many-faceted possibility of design, science, capability, and thinking and so forth is that we are going to let the machines do this kind of thing, let the machines and the automated systems and so forth with good design and good templates and that kind of thing do it, and it will free man in order to be concerned with the things that really matter.
Which are?
The creative things. Well, there's something to making
Which
a
are being,
good...
being productive.
Let me just say, for instance, but it might be productive not within the economic model. So that instead of the making of a movie being first, foremost, and only writing the contract in order to get the financing to make the movie, it's actually the creativity that's going into the writing and the thought and so forth. And you can get people away from the fact that every value is predicated upon monetary values, and if you can make a painting or you can do something worthwhile, it has no value unless it can fetch a price at Sotheby's, and the kind of mentality that makes everything a market consideration. We could free people from having to be concerned with all these silly market decisions that people have to be, and leads the human agenda, and can leave it to the important things that can never be bought, like love and these kind of things, that people would be free to lead good human lives because the machines will have taken over the quasi-robotic functions that mankind is asked to perform now in order to earn the right to have food and clothing.
These kinds of more or less romantic notions,
yeah, you could call it romantic,
which actually are the basis of Karl Marx's work,
and Bucky Fuller,
they're quite
and
similar.
Louis Kelso, I would say, in terms of...
They're quite similar, and in all this regard, are all worthy of consideration.
Yes, we should put them into the mix.
And
however,
the most important
we only got a
problems
minute.
that we now face,
fast.
the problems that we now face are the ones that will allow us to bring those questions to the fore.
Okay, it's a big question. It's something we got to deal with, and it's really good. I'm glad we could get to it, and we only could scratch the surface, but it's always good talking with Mark. Your pleasure.
Harold, thanks.
Your pleasure as the perceptions of Mark Stahlman. He is director of Newmedia Laboratories. He's in New York. We'll put contact information at the end of the program so you can catch up with him and so forth. And I'm going to go to that IBM site under research for the manifesto.
The research site, the Autonomic Computing Manifesto.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Well, there's I'm going to be going to that.
And also Dertruzos' book, The Unfinished Revolution.
Yeah. Okay.
That's very important to read.
Yeah. There's a lot.
That's probably the best single explanation of this entire area.
There's a lot going on, and again, I'm going to close it. People will hate it, but it's Daedalus saying in history. James Joyce had Daedalus say, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken. And one way or another, we'll try to focus on how we can awaken from a situation in the evolution of universal consciousness that we're at a time of awakening and birthing to a new kind of relationship in the cosmos, and getting some sort of a sense of this incredible moment of transformation is kind of what life is about, and kind of fun to do. And thank you for all the work you've been doing.
Thanks to you.
Okay, well, it's good talking to you. I don't know, we only just got talking, we just got started on that thing. But I like see, we're in access, so there's no money. There's going to have to be a lot of places for the expression of the human spirit that is not in the market. They're freed from that. So there's no money exchange, and people are going to be relating because that's where it feels good. And it is romantic and it's an ideal, but I don't think it's so outside the picture.
Unfortunately, or not, under the conditions in which most of us have been raised, we don't have anything worth saying. So that expression...
I don't think that's true.
Oh, I
don't find that true.
I'm quite confident
I find everybody I run into incredibly interesting.
Because that's the pattern that you expect to find.
No, but it is there. People are really interesting. I find life more interesting than anything they can put on a movie screen. I mean, people are cab drivers, everybody. Life is so interesting. And look at this, there's so much, you know what I'm saying?
I agree. Cab drivers are fabulous.
Yeah, they are. And people and fruit vendors and all kinds of people.
Where else in the world could you take a trip to Bangladesh for $5?
Yeah, right. Is that it? Okay. Okay, well, apparently we got it done. So that was really, that was good, Mark. I think, and that's a big thing. I'm going to want to go to that.
We barely mentioned Bucky or Kelso or McLuhan or any of those subjects.
I know. But that's really interesting, and I like that idea of design. Well, I got design science